So I realized I think I've been calling this series Lecture 15 and labeled the slides that, but it's actually Lecture 14, The Cold War, so I screwed up. I don't know, I'm going to go back and redo everything for that. When I put them on YouTube, they'll be clustered in the right playlist. It'll all make sense. We'll be okay. But we were talking about the Cold War. I had left you with Korea. I had explained how Korea had been divided into two occupation zones. The North, run by the Soviet Union, and the South, run by the United States, and that each superpower had set up their own government body to try to control things. The North, of course, being a totalitarian, authoritarian, communist dictatorship run by the Kim family, who still runs it today, poorly. And South Korea, of course, maybe not as democratic as we'd like, but we're going to try to make it better over time. Okay? That's kind of where I left you hanging. So here's what's going to happen. In 1950, I think it was June, if I recall, Mr. Kim, the leader of North Korea, decides he's going to invade South Korea. Well, he may have decided it earlier, but they actually do it like in late spring, early summer. Now, one thing we're not sure of is what Stalin knew about this. There's really three possibilities. One, that the North Koreans told the Soviets what they intended to do, and the Soviets encouraged it or didn't try to stop it. Or it could be that the Soviets were just as surprised that Kim had pulled this. Okay, the records are not necessarily easily accessible. The old Soviet archives were open for a little while after the fall of the Soviet Union. My understanding is that they've been largely closed to Westerners. Many of them don't speak Russian anyway, because there's a lot of embarrassing things in there, so it's harder to get in. So I've read different articles depending on when the articles were written, trying to figure out, how much did Stalin know? When did he know it? Was it a surprise to him? But one way or the other, North Koreans attack into South Korea, hoping to reunite the country under the benevolent guidance of our supreme leader, Mr. Kim. Now, this catches the South Koreans by surprise, more or less. Now, is there somewhere South Korea can go? An international body of collective security is supposed to help maintain the peace and work out difficulties? Yes, that would be the United Nations. But unlike the old League of Nations, the United Nations has the United States of America in it. It's got a little bit more clout behind it. So the people we want to talk to about this kind of thing are the Security Council. Now, the United States of America holds a permanent seat on the Security Council. So did the Soviet Union. Other countries rotate in and out. There are certain members that are always there. I think Great Britain might be one. But other countries rotate in and out of the seats. As it happened, though, the Soviets were boycotting meetings of the Security Council at the time over some other matter. I think it had something to do with China, but I'm not sure. I've read it, but I forget. And so when the South Koreans go to the Security Council and ask for help, the Soviets aren't there to veto the request. And so the United Nations Security Council authorizes the use of military force to protect South Korea. Now, we're talking about military force. Who do you think is really going to get the call? That's right, the United States of America. We're one of the great superpowers. And we're in past wars, after war, we've cut the size of our military back down to the bone. After World War I, we cut the military to just practically nothing. But we didn't do that quite as much in World War II. Now, we greatly demobilized because we had this huge army during World War II. Dozens and dozens and dozens of divisions. And so we just don't need that many men. We scaled everything back, but we have a little bit larger army than we normally have after a war. A lot of it's in Europe, keeping an eye on the Soviets. The nearest military forces on the scene, are in Japan. Let me get my pen here. Let me show you whose problem is this to deal with. General Douglas MacArthur. Remember him from the Pacific during World War II? You think he's older than dirt by now? He served in World War I. Okay. I think he's like 70. He's, I think, actually past the normal mandatory retirement age, but because he's a 5-star general, that's waived. Okay. He is in command of occupation forces in Japan. American occupation forces. Okay? These are the nearest troops on the scene because they're right here. This is Japan. Crap. All right. I didn't mean to advance that, but I was supposed to be clicking the pen, and instead it made it adjust. But that's okay. This map will work. All right. Because it shows Japan right here. All right. So the nearest American forces to Korea are in Japan. They're occupation troops. Okay. Now, so they quickly round up, and MacArthur's in command. Okay. They quickly round up some troops, send them over to North Korea. Okay. This is known as Task Force Smith. They're not necessarily a trained combat unit. All right. But it's a bunch of men they pulled off of various duties and put them together and sent them over under the command of a guy named Smith. All right. Now here's the deal, though. Are these the hardened combat veterans who had fought their way across the Pacific during World War II? Mostly not. Okay, that was 5 years ago. Those people have all served their enlistments and gone home. Oh, there's always a few grizzled veterans, people who like the Army and they stay in it. They're, the sergeants who've been there 20 years or whatever. But, I mean, a lot of these guys are, draftees, okay? Because we, kept the military, I said, in a little bit better shape than we did after World War I. They've been on cushy occupation duty because the Japanese aren't trying to kick us out. So these guys have been drinking sake, chasing geisha girls, teaching the Japanese how to play baseball. Okay, they're really not a trained combat force. But they slap them together. They head over to South Korea with a certain amount of, just kind of like, well, we're Americans, hey, we defeated the Empire of Japan. We defeated Adolf Hitler. We're not going to have trouble with a third-rate country like North Korea. But I said the men largely aren't combat veterans, although some of the officers are. They don't have enough anti-tank ammunition. The North Koreans are pretty well supplied with some very good tanks called the T-34 that were Soviet World War II surplus. So they don't have enough anti-tank ammunition. The bazookas, those are anti-tank rockets they're carrying, aren't big enough to stop the T-34. And they don't really have any heavy armor support because those would tear up the roads in Japan and we'd have to rebuild them. So they only have, aren't really any heavy armor units in the area. Task Force Smith goes over to South Korea, and the North Vietnamese army just kind of runs over them like an armadillo on a Texas highway. Okay? They don't even really do a very effective job of even slowing the North Koreans down. Okay? But while all this is going on, the American war machine is starting to wake up from its slumber. Okay, ships have been put into storage; they're being pulled out and reactivated. Reserves are being called up. Ammunition is being brought out of deep storage. Okay, the Great American War Machine is starting to wind back up again. Okay. In the meantime, the North Koreans push the American forces and the South Koreans, the ROKs, Republic of Korea forces, all the way down to near the port of Busan. Okay, and this is the Busan perimeter. They're hanging on to this little piece of the peninsula because they need this port. Okay, you need the port to bring in heavy supplies, ships and tanks and ammunition. So they're holding on desperately by their fingernails, trying to hang on to this port while reinforcements arrive. Okay. Meanwhile, MacArthur is starting to crank up his brain and come up with an idea on how to deal with the North Koreans. What he comes up with is the idea of invading up in South Korea. Instead of landing here at Busan, he wants to launch an amphibious assault. That's a seaborne assault that ends up on the land against a place called Incheon, which is close to the Korean capital of Seoul. This is the South Korean capital. This is the North Korean capital up here, but this is the South Korean capital. Land at Incheon and then advance over to Seoul, recapture the capital, which is the major city. It'd be good for morale. And then, theoretically, MacArthur could cut across the peninsula and trap the North Korean army down here. Okay? It's an audacious plan. Right? Now, they have to have a meeting to talk about this thing, and MacArthur's going, I shall land at Incheon and I shall crush them. And the Navy's like going, yeah, General, there's not a really good place to try to land an amphibious attack force. There's some problems here. One of the biggest problems is that the tides at Incheon are very extreme. The difference between high tide and low tide is very dramatic. Ships that go in at high tide could be trapped when the tide goes out. And there's islands that the North Koreans could have put artillery on. It's just, if you were looking to pick places to launch an amphibious assault, it's really not a very good place. The only thing it really has going for it is it's close to Seoul. Okay. MacArthur, though, sees he has several tools at his disposal. Not tools. He has several reasons why Incheon would be good. First of all, it's close to Seoul. If you want to recapture Seoul, it's the best place to go. Second, he's got, by now, they have been calling up reserves, and they have activated a lot of reserves from the United States Marine Corps, which are the people who do amphibious assaults. So here's these guys. They fought World War II. Some have been home on civilian life for 4 or 5 years, but guess what? You're still in the inactive reserves, or some had stayed in the active reserves for extra money, and all of a sudden they're called up and reconstituted back into, sent back into the 1st Marine Division. So MacArthur has an amphibious attack force that has, a lot of people who are veterans of the Pacific Campaign and know how to do amphibious assaults. I'm not saying everybody, but they've got, a good base of knowledge there. Everything he has going for him is, naval and air supremacy. I mean, there's no North Korean Navy to speak of that can interfere with this thing, and their Air Force is, not going to be able to deal with our aircraft carrier, ships that would support the invasion if needed, right? So we have, more firepower. And then finally, another thing he has going for him is just the sheer audaciousness of it. I mean, it's just such an over-the-top idea that will probably catch the North Koreans by surprise and be like, well, who'd be stupid enough to land at Incheon, for crying out loud? Okay. All right, so they have to have a meeting, though, and sell this, to all the commanders. And so, MacArthur's saying, this is what I want to do. And the Navy's like going, man, General, we don't think this is a good idea. There's several problems with landing at Incheon. Maybe we should come up with some other idea. And then here's supposedly what happened. I told you, MacArthur's a bit of a showboater. And the story goes, the story that's been told, that I wasn't there, but this is supposedly kind of what happened, is MacArthur starts reminiscing how during World War I, how the Navy had gotten the American Expeditionary Force safely to France without losing, men to the submarine menace. Okay, so the Navy got the army to France in World War I safely. Then MacArthur started talking about his long slug from Australia back up to the Philippines, up through those islands as his army troops, island hopped from one island to the other, trying to get back to the Philippines, and how the Navy supported him every step of the way. They transported his troops, they provided air cover, they fought away the Japanese counterattacks. And then supposedly he says something like, I never thought I'd see a day when the Navy couldn't support the Army at their time of need. And the Navy's like, holy crap, what do you say to that, right? He's the hero of the Pacific War. Okay, General, you want to go to Incheon? We'll take you to freaking Incheon. So they do. And it works, because the North Koreans are like, what? Who lands at Incheon? And the American troops quickly advance and recapture Seoul. Okay? And I'm coming up on the time window here, so we'll have to put a pause on this and then pick back up in the next video.